everyone. This is Talk Back. It's Monday, January 11th, 2021. Wow, we've just had a rough year, and the roughness is going into 2021. And let's hope all the best for everyone as we go forward. But it's been tough. And as we think about the current things, the past reverberates. I'm talking about the Holocaust. It reverberates in our consciousness, in our memories, and it's reverberating on the streets of the Capitol and in the Capitol building, where if you watched last week in the riot that came upon the Capitol building, there were Nazi T-shirts and symbols of Nazism. So our reverberations are with us, our memories are with us, and the trauma that we experienced in World War II and during the Holocaust is still reverberating. Today, I have a very special guest, Joan Stern, who is the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, Hans Stern, who was born in Berlin in 1927. And when he was 12 years old and the war was raging, he had the fortune to be rescued by an organization that brought German children, German Jewish children, to France and to the Chateau Chaban in France. Let me introduce Joan. Hi, Joan. It's good to have you here today.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Okay. So, Joan, you heard my introduction. The past reverberates. It's still with us. And you have an interesting story that's somewhat like mine. Your father was a Holocaust survivor, but during his lifetime, he hardly spoke about it. And yet you feel now at your stage in life, even though he's been gone for many years, at your stage in life, you feel you must continue to make a connection and learn as much as you can about him and the traumas that he had. And I, too, had a dad who was in World War II and suffered much trauma, died early, and also never talked very much about his experiences in the war that really traumatized him. But yet, like you, years and years after his death, we were impelled, my family was impelled to do all the research to find out just what he did in the war and how he turned out to be on the first wave on D-Day at Utah Beach. Unbelievable facts that we didn't know when he was alive. So I want you to describe to me the kinds of feelings I'm expressing about your search for information about your dad. How did it come about in your heart, in your need to explore this?
Well, I always felt that I wanted to find that missing piece in my life and the lives of my siblings. And before the internet, it was impossible. So then the Red Cross began releasing records here and there. And that's when we found out that his sister went to Auschwitz, but that was the only information we were able to get from the Red Cross. And fast forward all these years and the internet and things, my sister was watching TV one night, and she was actually half paying attention, and she was folding clothes, and she flipped by this documentary, and she decided to watch it because it was about Holocaust survivors. The thing that is so amazing is that in the film, they flip open to a page that has a roster of all the children that were in this particular class at this chateau. And it's really just a flash, but my sister saw my father's name on this school roster. And it was just phenomenal that she even saw it. So one thing led to another. We contacted the people that produced the documentary, and that's how we started finding out more and more about my father, because He died young. He never told us of any of his experiences, very few. And it left a hole. And so trying to find out more and more, it's starting to come together a little bit.
Okay.
But
so let's try to piece together bits that you know and have been learning about. But we also found out that he did a writing. He did describe his experiences in a kind of a book form that you've now sent to a French writer. Isn't that so?
yes, she is working on writing my father's book, just annotating because English was his second, third language. He spoke 5 languages. He spoke German, French, English, Hebrew. What was the 5th one? I can't remember the 5th one. But anyway, she's transcribing it because she's a historian and she's studying that time period where Jewish children were located in France. And that's how she found out about my father. So yeah, she's writing his book.
So that book, and we're going to show a picture of the cover a little bit later in our slideshow. But that book was something that you didn't look at or learn anything about as you were growing up. Is that right?
I knew it existed, but my mother said it was fiction, and it really wasn't. It was absolutely nonfiction. And, as a kid, I didn't think about reading this story about World War II. So it just sat in the attic.
Okay. And now you want to absorb as much information as you can, right?
Right.
You want to learn as much as you can about him. Because you described to me in our discussions about this, he had a personality that you believe was one of a troubled soul, someone who was angry, who may have been depressed, and who obviously suffered tremendous trauma, right?
Right.
Yeah. So let's start piecing it together. Tell us about your father being born in Berlin and about his family, and we'll take it from there.
He was born in 1927 in Berlin. He had an older sister named Ursula. She was maybe 4 to 5 years older. And his father was a clerk for the city of Berlin. His mother sang opera. I don't think it was professionally. And actually, his father also played piano and gave lessons. And his father, I think 1938, sometime early in the year, lost his job. He was just fired because he was Jewish. And he, of course, would not get a pension or any money. And I don't know anything other than that. I know that they made arrangements for the children. So my father was sent to an orphanage, and his sister was sent to live with an attorney, and she was their maid. And he stayed in this orphanage, and his parents committed suicide. They were despondent. I'm just gathering, they knew what their fate was. And I'm sure they couldn't feed their children. They were starving, and they had no money. And this was right before Kristallnacht, so it was in August of 1938. They committed suicide on the same day.
Wow. How did you find that out? Did you see that in newspaper accounts?
No, it really, I was helped out by the woman in France, Laura. She's a historian, as I said, so she's got access to a lot of different records and books and libraries that I could never even dream of. So she found this little article that uh, a German woman. It spoke of my grandparents and how they had committed suicide. And it's just a very short paragraph, and it was told to this German woman. And long story short, that's all it is, just a paragraph.
Right.
But then it was told to her by a cousin. So I tried to track this cousin down. Eventually I did, and of course, he had died 2 years prior, which was devastating to me. But he was a war hero guy. And it just, the whole thing was amazing to me, but it was also very sad because I missed it by a couple of years.
Yeah. So there was also something unusual about the medical disability that both of Hans's parents had, right? Tell about that.
Yeah, his father lost a leg in World War I, and his mother lost a leg in a train accident. I know nothing else about the train accident. I've tried to look it up to see, but I just don't have any information on that.
So are you making an assumption that they committed suicide after they gave Hans away and after his sister Ursula left to live with this other family? Is that what you think happened?
Yeah, I think that it is my assumption that they made arrangements for their children, because you wouldn't just kill yourself and leave your children to fend for themselves during this horrible time.
Okay. So you once, in our previous discussions we've had about preparing for this, you talked about the fact that your dad never really wanted to know what happened to his sister, although you...
No, he actually did. Yeah, he did. He tried to find her, actually. I found some old copies of letters that he had sent to the International Tracing Service, and I saw their response to him. They're actually in the Holocaust Museum. There are copies of all these things. And he tried to contact her, tried to find her, but he wasn't able to. And it's only years after that we found out that she was killed in Auschwitz.
Okay, so I probably didn't express it correctly. I think you explained, not that he didn't want to know, but I guess he tried to find her, but when he didn't, he still, I guess, held out hope beyond hope that maybe she was still alive.
Oh, yes.
I think that's what
you even after he died, we all did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I meant, that this belief, that the hope that lives on beyond what's really reasonable to be thinking at this point. But that's the emotion of it. So your dad, had that trauma in addition to what happened to his parents and what he lived through. Right. So now we will go back to 1938, right before Kristallnacht. His parents commit suicide. He's in an orphanage. His sister is sent with another family. Tell us about his journey from the orphanage and what happens next.
It's sketchy. I'm not sure exactly how they were all transported. There were 42 boys that were rescued by this organization. It's called OSE. The initials are OSE. I can't pronounce the French word, but basically it's Organization for Children. And that's not quite right. But anyway, they arranged for these children to go to France, and they went to the unoccupied part of France, and all these children went to different villages and different chateaus and things. So they were able to stay there.
So, but before he got to the chateau, which was in Chabannes, which had a beautiful old chateau, which became a refuge for these these children. At some point, the Germans did take over that area. He arrived just around the time that Germany was invading France, right?
Right.
And he experienced some of the war time, going from one chateau to France, back to a chateau
Right.
in order to be safe, and finally winding up for about 2 years in Chateau Chaban
Hmm.
in France, right?
Yes.
And
Um,
you learned about the experiences from someone named Graham. Tell us about it, who was a famous promoter of entertainment and so on, who was also one of the children rescued from Germany and sent to France, and wrote a very long article about it that mentions your dad's name and has a snippet from your dad's book in his
mhm.
article. Tell us about how you put together what happened to your dad from Mr. Graham's story.
I found it searching the internet, and I was really shocked because as a kid, Bill Graham was this big concert promoter, and he did a lot of promoting for the Grateful Dead, who I was really into. And so I just thought he was an idol. And I was really shocked to find out that he, in fact, was one of the children. They call them the hidden children in France. So Bill Graham wasn't Bill Graham. He had a very German name whose name escapes me right now, but he went to France with my father. So he wrote a very long chapter in history. Well, it's not as detailed as my father's, but it's very interesting. And I got a little more information from that because everyone else has their own memories. So
So tell us about what you learned about Shaban and how that became a refuge for these kids, and what life was like there for your dad.
um, they opened up this chateau to the children, and they wanted to assimilate these Jewish refugee children into the village of Shaban. And this was a village, and the people were very kind to them. And they actually were able to play with the French children, and they had their own educators in the chateau, and they were very strict with the children, but in a good way. They had to show them how to prepare for anything that would happen when the Nazis came in. They made sure that physical fitness was very important and things like that. Uh, they taught them French, and they made sure that they could speak French very well so that they could assimilate, because they all spoke German. So they had lessons there. Uh, they actually, the French, the teachers and the man that brought them in, they were all so good to the children, and it was really just beautiful how the village accepted them into their fold.
So it's interesting. I found in some of the notes that you sent me and that I looked up the name of OSE.
Right.
So it is the oeuvre, the work de secours, of rescuing, secours, aux enfants. Okay, that's OSE, the work of rescuing the children. That's the name of and the French. And then at the Chaban, at the chateau, you had Mr. Chevrier, Schevrier. He was the main headmaster of the place who really managed it. And then there were two women, Irene Palissou and I think her sister, is that right? Who were
Right.
also teachers in the village. And these people, I think, are now in the Righteous Gentiles Grove at Yad Vashem, are they?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Yes. And the way you described it, Joan, they wanted to assimilate the kids so that they could be hidden as French kids because the Nazis did come calling. Tell about that.
They did. They would come to the house, to the chateau, and they would speak to the children, and the children would use their best French. And as the commandant of the village, as things were heating up, he had to come more and more. But he was also friends with Monsieur Chevalier. So he would actually tip them off when the German police were coming. And the children would go into the woods and they'd go hiking when they knew the police were coming. So they just arranged to help these children until it got too late and they couldn't help them anymore.
Right. So on one occasion, several children were taken by the Nazis.
Yes.
I think I read, and we've talked about two of those children did perish in the Holocaust.
Right.
But otherwise, the others were saved.
They were saved.
And when it became too dangerous to continue to house them, arrangements were made for them to leave. Describe how that happened.
It's very interesting. The American Friends Committee, I think it's called, but it's actually the Quakers. There were Quakers that went to France and they worked there and they arranged to take these children out of their situation, and eventually they were able to get them to they put them all on trains and they went from Paris to Spain and from Spain to Portugal. And they were able to stay in Portugal for, maybe 5 days. And then they were all put together in different groups. And some went to England, some went to the United States, and some went to Israel.
Okay. And your dad came to the U.S.
Yes.
Obviously. And before we go forward with his journey, continuing from there, was there anything else you want to tell us about that were written in his book describing his experiences that you think are noteworthy?
Just some of the horrors that these children saw. He talks about taking a bike ride, and they had 4 bikes among them. So he went for a bike ride, and he saw a foxhole. He was riding by a foxhole, and the curiosity got the best of him. And he saw this hand, and he went a little closer, and he realized it was just a hand. And then a little further away was just a leg. And he looked into the foxhole, and there was a sort of a mutilated head with a tongue sticking out.
Ooh.
As he says, the tongue was sticking out at me. And they talk about corpses that they saw when they were on the road, because they had to do a lot of walking. There were times when they would have to leave the chateau because things were just, the Nazis were too close, and they would leave for days. They'd just take a big wagon and they'd take turns rolling the wagon. And my father was one of the bigger boys, so he got stuck rolling the wagon a lot. But yeah, they just saw terrible things that a child should never, a human should never see.
Right. So he was 12 years old when he went to Shaban, and at 14, in 1941, he was able to make passage to the U.S., right?
Right.
And so tell us, what did his journey take him to then?
He went to New York, and from there, all the children that he was with were again sent out in groups to different cities. And my father just happened to be sent to Pittsburgh, PA, and that's where he lived. He went from one foster home to another, and he had 3 different foster families. So I just get the feeling that he never felt wanted. His parents kill themselves. He stays in one foster home. He likes it there, then he gets sent to another. He likes it there, then he gets sent to another. So I just feel that that's part of his trauma.
Sure.
Trauma.
Were there any family members that had emigrated to the U.S. before Hans, your dad, did, or
No,
any family at all?
no. Not that
None.
we've ever been able to find. And now with the internet, I still haven't. I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
Even a 5th cousin would be nice. And I'm sure there's a 5th cousin out there somewhere.
Yeah. So I asked you your feelings when you're growing up. Most kids, at least they have grandparents out of possible 4. They may have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And their grandparents may have a brother or sister. They may have great aunts and uncles, or so on. Did it ever strike you, or how did you think about it as a child, that your father had nobody? You had no grandparents, no cousins, no aunts, no uncles from him. How did that affect you?
I always felt different from other kids, and I've heard other children of Holocaust survivors say the same thing. But I always felt really sad for him that he didn't have anybody. And it always felt really weird to me because I only had one grandparent, which was my mother's mother, and one uncle, which was her brother, and nobody else on his side. So yeah, it felt like there was just this whole half, that doesn't make sense. There was half of me that was missing, that just was blank.
Right. And again, to keep thinking about it, you never, of course, he died very young in 1969. He was only 41 years old. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but you were born in 59. So you were a kid. You were about 10 years old at the time. You never had a chat with your dad about his history, his experiences, ever?
No, he wouldn't let me. I remember once saying Hogan's Heroes makes fun of Nazis because I wanted to get him to talk about something. And he just ignored it. He didn't say anything about that.
Yeah.
I thought he might get mad because he got mad at a lot of stuff, but he wasn't angry. He just ignored that comment.
Yeah. But you expressed to me that you, looking back now and analyzing it now as an adult, you felt a sense of anger, frustration, sadness, depression in him.
Yes.
And it affected his relationship with the family.
Yes. It was hard. All he saw around him growing up was pain and hunger and death. So he was very strict with us. And he was a scary guy. We were scared of him.
Really?
He was angry. There were moments many moments when he was sweet to us girls, but not my brother, really.
You had, how many siblings did you have?
3.
Okay.
2 brothers and a sister.
Okay. So you grew up in Pittsburgh, right?
Right.
But
Well,
notwithstanding.
no, I'm sorry. I didn't grow up there. We left when I was about 4, I think.
Okay, you were born in Pittsburgh when your
Yeah.
dad was there.
Mhm.
So interesting, as you expressed to me, you felt that notwithstanding all the trauma, all the sadness, all the anger that you felt, your dad still was a successful engineer, wasn't he?
Yes.
And you talk about this, the striving for excellence, for education, and how you expressed it for independence. Talk about that.
He worked very hard. He always had jobs growing up. And the reason, by the way, that I know these things is because Laura, who's writing the book, was able to get records from the organization that fostered him. So I just was able to put together a story there. And they did talk about how he always worked, he always had jobs. He was hard to get along with, but he did work very hard. He was a very good student, and he wanted to go to school. He wanted to go to college. He worked toward that.
And he did go to the University of Pittsburgh?
Yes.
And is that where he met your mother?
That's where he met my mom.
Okay. And then I think you described in 1963, the family moved to Connecticut because your dad got a job with Pratt Whitney. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And how did the family feel about making that move at that time? Do you remember your feelings at that point?
I was so little, but I still remember sitting in this brand new house on a floor, a hardwood floor. I don't even think we had lights. It was dark in the living room, and I was sitting on the floor with my brother. And I just remember it was an exciting thing. It was a brand new house, and it was ours.
Right. And your dad was a smoker. I've seen photos that you show him with a cigarette in his hand.
Very heavy smoker.
Did he have any big health emergencies or health issues before he had his illness and death in 1969?
No, I don't think so. He had kidney stones at one point, and that's when they discovered he had diabetes, and he was really trying to quit smoking. And as a little kid, I thought maybe that the kidney stones are what killed him. You know how kids are. Because it wasn't that long afterward that he had the heart attack.
So describe that day, what happened?
It was spring cleaning time, and you leave all your garbage on the side of the road for pickup. And we had one of those ancient tube TVs that weighed a lot. It was in our basement. I don't know how much it weighed, but it took 2 people to carry it up. And it was probably it had to have been from the 50s. So anyway, my mother asked my brother and my father to bring it upstairs for garbage pickup. And my father got to the top of the stairs, and he just looked really weird. And he went and sat on the couch. And my brother sent my sister and me upstairs and said, "Stay up there." And we knew something was wrong. We knew something was really wrong.
Yeah.
And a little while after that, we heard the ambulance come. My mother left. I remember the show that was on. I remember everything as a little girl, but I remember it very well.
Yeah. And now it was a fatal heart attack at the time.
Right.
Yeah. So you had that second trauma, living with a dad who had his Holocaust trauma, and then you had that. Your mom was left as a single mother with 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
And it must have been rough after that.
It was very rough. My younger brother was autistic and he was hyperactive, and she needed to spend a lot of time with him, and she also needed to care for us. And my father didn't leave any he had no insurance, so my mother really didn't have much money, and she was able to feed and clothe and take care of us. But it was hard.
So let's fast forward to 1999. Your mother gets a letter in the mail about a reunion. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Jose had a reunion in Washington, D.C. And I think my sister and I are the ones that got my mother to go with us because we really wanted to go. So the 3 of us ended up going, and it was and my brother showed up at some point. My brother's a rabbi, and they wanted him to do a memorial service, so we had him come. And so it was a bit of a family affair. It was
So did they have the living survivors of the Chaban Chateau
yes.
at that reunion?
Mm-hmm.
And some of them your father would have known who they were. He had some friends that he stayed in contact with during his years in the U.S.
There were a couple.
Yeah.
Most people I talked to, if they did know my father, they said they didn't know him well and that he was just very quiet. And I think he was a loner for the most part.
Mm. Now, you also said there was a letter 10 years or so before, in 1990. There was another reunion that your mother was invited to, and this time it was in France, but she didn't go. Is that right?
Right. They had the reunion in France. That wasn't even a thought for her.
Yeah. Well, when you learned about that, was that when you started to think about your dad's experiences and how you wanted to learn more? Was that part of that feeling?
No, because I didn't know about Chaban yet. I had heard of Jose. I knew they were instrumental in getting him over here, but that's all I knew. And
so you weren't ready for your explorations at that point.
I didn't think there was anything to explore.
So it turns out that a woman named Lisa Gassels,
Mm-hmm.
Her father and uncle, I guess her father and his brother, were at Chaban, and she is a filmmaker, and she made a documentary in 1999 to 2000, which was around the time that you went to the reunion, right?
Right.
And you and I met when you tried to talk to me about that documentary, which is not available for viewing now unless we purchase it. We would try to get a hold of it. But you watched it, isn't that right?
Yes.
And it got excellent reviews. And we're going to show a little trailer from it that we're able to show. And from there, Joan, we're going to show a PowerPoint slideshow of your dad and some of the photos of Chaban and some of the documents that you've provided about your father's life and journey. Okay. So let's take a look. I'm going to ask the studio to have my screen on the video, which is the trailer for the documentary called The Children of Chaban by Lisa Gassels. Can you see that, Joan?
Yes.
All right, let's play it.
They were refugees and orphans. children of the war.
I arrived in Chaban in 1941 on a very cold day, a very sad little girl.
Rescued by a small French village that knew neither prejudice nor hate.
We were German Jewish children in a community that probably had never seen any Germans before, probably never seen any Jewish kids before.
They were nurtured, schooled, and protected from a force determined to see them die.
We seemed in an insulated enough place, not so much isolated, but insulated enough place. We did not feel the fear until that big bus came, the police bus.
From documentary filmmakers Lisa Gossels and Dean Weatherell, the story of extraordinary people who risked their lives to save other people's children.
Ce temps pour moi, c'est un temps lumineux d'amour pour enfants, d'amitié. Vous savez, c'est un temps lumineux, malgré le temps difficile comme c'est.
Many of us, perhaps most of us, never saw our parents again. So these young adults who took care of us were our parents, and they guided us toward a better life.
The children of Shaban.
That was a great trailer. It makes you want to see the documentary, and we will try to get a hold of it and share it with our viewers and others. Okay. And now I want to start a slideshow where, Joan, you can describe the photos and identify the people and places that we have. Okay.
Okay.
Studio ready with that, with the PowerPoint? Here we go. All right. The Children of Shaban, the experience of Hans Stern. So, Joan, this is the DVD of the documentary, right?
Right.
Were you able to get a hold of it, the DVD, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have this.
Okay. So we need to try to figure out a way that we can share it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, who is that?
That's my father as a little boy. I suspect he's around 11 there.
And on the bottom it says, portrait of Jewish child Hans outside Shaban Children's Home. So it's probably around the time that he arrived, right? Well, he got there in 39, so he was about 11, 12, right?
Right. And we had never seen this picture before until we went to the Holocaust Museum in DC. And they had it in their records.
Wow. Oh, the other thing is, I shared with you from the Holocaust Museum the oral histories from some of the people who were interviewed for the film. Did you get a chance to listen to some of those interviews?
I did. I was so excited to see those.
Yeah. I think those are the interviews that Lisa, the filmmaker, used in doing the documentary. Whoops. Oh, I need to go back. Because I skipped the slide. Hold on. I'm going to start from the beginning. I don't want to miss anybody. There's your dad, Hans. And who is that?
That is his father, Kurt.
Okay. And he was the clerk in Berlin?
Yes.
Right.
And a pianist.
And who was that?
And that was his mother, Marta.
Okay. And you said she was a singer?
Yes, I don't know to what extent, but she sang opera.
Well, I skipped one again. Let me go back. I want to make sure we get all of the people that we're talking about. Marta, and who is that?
And that's his sister, Ursula.
Right. she was older than he?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, describe this photo. It takes place, it's 1963.
It's my father and two of the children, quote unquote. One of them is Stephen Louis, and I can't remember who the other one is. And they, I guess, had their own little reunion. This was somewhere on Long Island.
So these two guys were in Shaban with your dad.
Right.
Okay. And this is the same year that you moved from Pittsburgh up to Connecticut, right?
Yes.
Okay. What is that?
That's just a picture of my mom and dad. It's not a very good one, but it's what I was able to dig
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And that's another one that I took right out of the frame. This was before I was born, so that's my older brother and my sister.
Okay. And this is just one of the posters for the documentary that won several awards and various reviews on it, right?
Right.
And this is the chateau.
It's great
And-
with the stamp on it and everything.
Yeah, it was a postcard from France. And this one that shows the OSC Chateau de Quincy. And the interesting thing is, as we were talking about from Graham's account and your father's, they were at the Chateau de Quincy before they got to Shaban. And there's your dad. Can you identify where he is in this photo? His name is on the list of kids that are listed there.
He is the second from the right.
He's the tallest kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. How tall was he? About.
He was 6 feet,
Yeah.
which to us, my family, were all short, so that's really tall.
Right. And this is just your dad is also in this photo of Shaban kids. Which one is he here?
He is the last one on the left that you could see, and there's sort of a half a head behind him.
Right. Again, he's a pretty tall kid. He's behind the adults. Yeah. The third person going up on the left-hand side, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And some of these other photos are just what I've taken from the internet that showed the kids and the chateau at that point. So there were girls and boys there. The literature says that there were about 400 kids all told that came through Shaban at one point or another during those few years. Right?
Yeah, there were several homes too. There were more than several.
Right.
So I don't know if that's total all the chateaus that
Mhm.
Jose handled.
Here's another one. Your dad's not in this photo, but it's another photo from Shaban.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I think shows in the front those two teachers and the Chevrier,
Right.
The guy who ran it. And these people had to be very brave.
Very brave. They weren't Jewish. They didn't have to do this. They were very strong. Took really good care of the children.
Right. And that's another photo of the chateau, another picture of it. Another photo from the Shaban internet photos. Same here, another castle. And I think this is the way it looks today. Don't know research what it's used for today or how it's represented in the town. But I believe that is the chateau as it sits now. Do you know anything about that?
I can't remember which one of them is a bed and breakfast. I
Oh,
can't remember if it's that one or not.
okay. Looks beautiful.
It does.
Again, Chateau de Chabon, and that's the school they went to,
Mm-hmm.
the school. And ORT is a very important Jewish organization that helps the kids. ORT and OSC, the one that your father was sponsored by to get to Chabon. Another photo of the, again, I'm sure you've looked through all of these to see if there are any more with your dad's image in them, right?
Yeah.
Look like even younger kids.
Yeah, I think he was considered one of the older kids.
Yeah. Another one. Another one. And this is the cover of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It says Children Under Nazi Invasion
Boots, is it?
Roots
Roots.
by John Stern. So did your dad change his name from Hans to John
He
in
did. He
America?
Americanized it.
Okay. Any resemblance or similarity to the lives of people living or dead is purely accidental. Some of this, what is it? Can you read what it says under there, Joan?
I can't. I'm sorry. I don't have the hard copy with me.
Yeah. Some of these stories returned to Germany and I can't.
Oh, it's something like some of the people in the stories return to Germany and he doesn't want to get them in trouble, is basically what it's saying.
Oh, okay. So you think of him as Hans or John at this point?
John.
Oh, okay. But his name is Hans Stern. Yeah. All right. And what's this?
That's a piece of the book that he wrote.
Right. And this was a description that was in the Graham essay, what they did when they had to keep running away because the Germans were invading France. And they were as you said many times, on the road back and forth in between chateaux to be safe. We went back north. They all had the happy smile of a sure victory on their faces. These are the German soldiers. They all were smiling with a piece of French bread in one hand and some French meat on their plates. They all looked at us with pity. Sometimes one of these good-hearted Nazis, quote, would throw some Frenchmen a piece of bread. In one place, the Germans had set up a mobile canteen for the hungry population, as they called it. Many people were standing and getting some food and so forth. When that made a good impression on the starved people, when we passed by, we heard some of them talk, the Germans are treating us better than our own soldiers ever did. Or sometimes the Germans are not really as bad as everyone said they would be. Poor people, there is no one there from Warsaw to tell them of the Nazi trickery. So he knew the story. Now, do you know at what age he wrote this?
He wrote it when he got to the U.S., so I think he was around 17.
Okay. Okay. No, they did not know that someday many of them would be shipped away to Germany for slave labor and so on. So it's an interesting piece of a young boy's experience. And then we have a lot of these papers from Germany. It looks like 39, when I think your dad was getting ready to be transferred and he was getting medical reports and so forth. Is that how you interpret this?
Yes.
Okay. And these are a lot of paperwork that had to be done from the orphanage in Germany in order to be able to go to France.
Right.
And more of the same. And this is interesting. When he got on the way to France in French, he was born, né, on the October 29th, 1927 in Berlin.
It's the other way around.
Pas de Pere. What?
October 29th,
29th, 1927.
1927. Is
Yeah.
that what you said? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I said, well,
I heard it backward.
all right. Pas de père, no father. Pas de mère, no mother. Pas de sœur, no sister. Pas de frère, no brother. Pas de parents in America. Nobody in America. No parents in America. Nobody. And again, getting ready, Hans Stern getting ready to be transferred in 1941 from France to America. This was in 1939, again, going from Germany to France, I believe, right?
Right.
Same thing, going from Germany to France. And here is the list or manifest of alien passengers on the SS Muzinho, sailing from Lisbon. What?
Right. I don't know how to pronounce that. Muzinho.
Sailing from Lisbon, August 20th, 1941, arriving at the port of New York, September 2nd, 1941. And your dad is listed on the next page, I believe. Do you see him in the middle, number 18, Hans Stern, Hans Adolf? Tax status, age,
Adolf was his middle
13.
name.
You see that? Place of birth, Berlin. Nationality, German. Race or people, Hebrew. Immigration visa, passport. Last permanent residence, Marseille, France. That's what they listed. Has ticket for final destination, and so on. Joining friend or relative in the U.S.? No. He's going to the United States Committee of Protection of European Children. That's what who was going to take care of him. And this seems to be a list of all the places that he was at, leading to New York City, Berlin, Germany, to USA, Chateau Chaban, Saint Pierre, Frissac, and Cruz. That's the section of France that Chaban is in. His parents, Kurt and Martha. Do you know, this seems to be everything about his life and his travels and where he's been.
Yeah, I don't understand a lot of that.
Yeah, it seems to be a historical document. The last from Marseille to New York to the United States Committee of Protection of European Children. They were the ones who oversaw his journey to America. And then he had to get his birth certificate, right?
Right.
Because he wanted to become an American citizen. So this is a copy, I believe, of page 1 and 2 of his birth certificate that he got from Germany to bring to the States. And I think this was his original naturalization papers, citizenship papers, right? And again, he doesn't use Hans, he uses John. His middle name was Adolf, right? John,
yeah, he did not.
Stern.
That was not common knowledge.
Yeah.
It was John A.
Well, I think people would probably shy away from having a middle name like Adolf, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which was probably a very common name in Germany.
Yeah.
In the 20s and 30s. But yeah, John Adolf Stern. And again, so now we come to a very interesting thing. Your dad came in 1941. And by 1945, he was about 18 years old, right? And he enlisted in the Army.
You know what? After we talked last night, I realized that, or I looked through more paperwork, and he was in fact drafted.
Okay.
He was only in for a year.
He was, all right, so he separated June 5th, 1947. But what he did was really important. Can you tell us what he did in the war? He was sent to Germany, wasn't he?
Yes, he was counterintelligence, and he was interviewing suspected Nazis and spies, and I don't know all of what else he was doing.
You said he spoke German, he spoke
Yep.
English. By this time, he spoke French. It says conducted investigations of crimes, sabotage, treason, and subversive activities about German civilians suspected of Nazi sympathies. Okay, and so his knowledge and his facility in German and French was used to do this as the war was ending and as we were collecting the evidence for the Nuremberg trials and for all of the legal cases that were bringing some of the Germans to justice. So your dad, and again, did he ever talk to you about this?
No.
No.
I knew he was a veteran.
Yeah.
That's all I knew.
And again, this is his honorable discharge, again in 1947, and he got the World War II Victory Medal. So that is the slideshow. Very interesting. Some of the German passages, I think we're going to try to get a translation for people I know who can translate it better. But what is your goal now? What do you further want to do to get information about your dad, to get closer to him and what he went through?
Well, I'm on Ancestry.com. I'm always looking. I've been able to find who I think might possibly have been his grandparents. I should say their names. I find bits and pieces still. My goal is to find a cousin, even a fifth cousin. I've had my DNA done. My brother's had his DNA done. But it's hard because you have tens of thousands of fourth and fifth cousins. We all share DNA. So it's been difficult, but as I said, I'm not going to give up.
So has the Holocaust Museum, you say that there are some documents of your dad's that are at the museum already, the one in DC. Is there, other than what you and I found the other day with the oral histories by the people that Lisa Gessel's interviewed for the documentary, are there any other pieces of information and research that you found there about Siobhan, about your dad? Are you still looking?
I'm still looking, but more so I'm looking for his family tree. And I have gone to the museum for that, and they were able to dig up kind of the same stuff I did, that his parents committed suicide, things like that. So, yeah, I feel like I know a lot about Siobhan now. Now I just want to know his family tree.
Okay. So we have two unfinished pieces of business that we have to do with you. One is to get the documentary that we can share and show. Mm-hmm. And two, when the person in France finishes the book that compiles your father's thoughts and his writings and translates them and so forth, we'll have to have a discussion about that and review that and see what else we can mine out of that to keep that Holocaust and memory reverberation going that you're finding so important for your life. Okay. Yes. So any final thoughts before we sign off for today? Joan, it's been a pleasure meeting you and learning about your dad. And again, sharing that same feeling that we both had dads that died young, that experienced great trauma, that didn't talk about it while they were alive, and yet we have this tremendous need to connect with them after their deaths and learn as much as we can. Why don't you give us some final thoughts about that?
Actually, my final thoughts have to do with the invasion of the Capitol and watching that and just the horror. It just hurt me deeply. And all I could think of about was my father and what he went through. And then to see that man wearing the sweatshirt that said Camp Auschwitz, I was just horrified. And I don't even know what my point is there, but the whole thing, I guess my point is that it does remind me of what my father went through.
Okay. Well,
And
we've come full circle. We've come full circle, Joan, because I started talking about that. It reminded me of that also, seeing those Nazi symbols and that T-shirt,
yeah,
and that the Holocaust and the lessons that we still need to learn from it are still reverberating. And we can't believe that in this country things like that could happen. So my thoughts are just as yours are. And may your dad's memory be for a blessing. And I look forward to talking to you again. Okay.
and you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
So, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Talkback. Our next show will be with Helen Elperina. We're talking about the Jews of the Soviet Union and the discrimination and traumas they went through, and how Helen came to this country. And again, more of the American dream, like Hans Stern in a way. Okay, bye-bye. See you next time.
Bye.